Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews bringing you the last year-end list of 2020. This is the top 20 best albums of 2020. So, let's not beat around the bush here. 2020 has been a pretty horrible year in many different aspects. World events, political traumas, and of course the pandemic that couldn't go away soon enough. And while I'm not that qualified to discuss any of those, I am about music, and thankfully it was a very solid year for music releases. No doubt this will be a long video, so let's strap in and get started. First off, quick rules, one album per artist as usual, and of course this is my opinion. I didn't get to every single album this year, and no doubt there will be some big name omissions here that you would have expected because either I didn't get around to listening to it, or I just wasn't for the hype like everyone else was. As always, you're more than welcome to leave your own list in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to see where you all stand on 2020's music scene as a whole. And also, a lot of the albums on here are ones that I already reviewed, so if you want to see full, in-depth reviews of those albums, there will be cards in the corner for each album that has a designated review, and you can go check them out from there. But with all that out of the way, let's get started with some honorable mentions. Starting off the list proper, we have the Chicks with their new album, Gaslighter. So this was a very big deal of an album for the Chicks, previously known as the Dixie Chicks. It was their first album since their public boycotting in 14 years, and it was a real make or break moment for the group, and I personally think they succeeded tremendously. Everything about this album is immaculate. The production choices, the vocal mixing, it's really close to a pop album, and that shows on the opening leg with the first and title track, one of my favorites here. It still has a twangy tone to it, mainly in the guitar, but the melodies, the drum machine, it hollers pop proudly thanks to producer Jack Antonoff. Speaking of Jack, he manages to not deface the Chicks either. The album still has its country elements, mainly towards the latter moments of the record. The slower tracks like Young Man, Juliana Calm Down, and especially Closer Set Me Free, both tracks thrive off the strength of singer Natalie Maines. I expected to come out of this album pleased, but wow, this is a stellar release. Great album. Next honorable mention goes to Selena Gomez's Rare. Am I the only critic on this planet who remembered this and actually thought it was really good? Probably, but I'll still firmly stand by that opinion, and I'd be doing myself a great disservice by not including it on this list at some point. I think this is Selena's best album, her punchiest production, her most captivating grooves, and especially sassy and confident as well. This is an exuberant and yet still mature Selena, and she balances those two characteristics very well. On one end, tracks like Look at Me Now, Ring, Rare, and Fun are the sillier songs, and mature can be defined with Lose You to Love Me alone, but also Cut You Off, and People You Know show some true emotional maturity, and it's enjoyable. Also, some catchy grooves in the form of Crowded Room, and especially Dance Again with that killer slap bass line. Love this album. Great job, Selena. Give this a second chance, guys. There's magic here. Next honorable mention goes to Hayley Williams with Petals for Armor. While I may not have been the biggest fan of the way Hayley was marketing this record, releasing the album in short 5-track EP formats, adding up to a full 15-track album, the final release was truly a sight to behold. Not gonna lie, I'm kinda surprised Hayley didn't take the chance to break away from the group and go straight for a pop career, especially with how After Laughter turned out, and as such a left turn into Radio Ready City. But I'm certainly not complaining with what we got here, an alternative pop and rock album with a Hayley Williams twist to it. The production is very well polished and every track stands out in its own unique way. Album opener and lead single Simmer has this chunky bass line over this flatter drum melody, leading to a reverb-enhanced chorus. The track only ages well with every single listen. I also really like Dead Horse with that shaker added to the mix, and one of the poppiest hooks here. And yet I still couldn't even see this on pop radio. It's such an entrancing listen with Hayley's hypnotizing melodies flowing very well across this alt-pop beat. Rose's Lotus Violet Iris is another standout to me, and even at its nearly 5.5-minute runtime, the strings, the ambient synths, the driving drum work, and Hayley's impassioned lyrics, it's so easy to get swept up in this track, and it's over before you know it. Pure Love is another favorite of mine here, yet again balancing the lines between pop and alternative. With the hand rubs, the guitar and drums make it feel like a singer-songwriter situation, but that chorus and its shimmering synth shine so bright as a highlight for this album. There's so much to enjoy for pretty much everyone, and you'd be missing out on a lot if you haven't checked this out. Next honorable mention goes to Mac Miller and Circles. Now, I have mentioned previously that I never like talking too much about posthumous albums. It just never feels right to evaluate an artist's body of work who wasn't even alive to see that release hit the light of day. So I'll try to keep this one especially brief, but I do really love this record. Supposedly this and Swimming are meant to be paired up. Max said they're completely different records, but they complete a full circle, and I can definitely agree with that. Circles is a much calmer, easygoing record than Swimming, and presents a bunch of stylistic mashups and amalgamations. It even at times doesn't feel like a hip-hop record. There are times here as well where Max sounds like he's found peace of mind, which is really good news if you take into consideration everything he was going through with substances, rocky relationships, and an overall negative mental state. So those moments really are reassuring to hear, even years after he passed, especially with the bleak and weary tones in his voice all across this record. We lost Mac way too soon, and while it is tough that this will be the last release we probably see from his name, hearing his innermost thoughts come out through this record, it feels like a blessing. This was the idea Mac seemed to envision, and I'm glad he achieved it. Rest in power, King. Way too soon. Next honorable mention goes to Hot Country Nights with the K is silent. God, this album is just so damn fun. Everything about this, it's blatantly cheesy, it's ridiculous, it's over-the-top punny, silly country music, and goddammit, it's the best country release I've heard this year. There's so much nostalgia sprinkled throughout this to all those 90s country artists. It is definitely a niche album as well. If you haven't heard that era of country, you may not fully understand or get the hype, but honestly, I think this is just so damn accessible, anyone can find something to enjoy here, especially lead single Pick Her Up, a goofy little song about trying to impress this country girl with stereotypical tropes. Pick her up in a pickup truck, have a cold beer, and if you can sit past the onslaught of various solos at the end of the track, it's so damn quirky. Along with Asphalt, which uses the word asphalt as a play on words for this relationship, where he sings, "It ain't my fault, it's that asphalt," but it's sung in this passionate ballad style. It's so obviously parody, but it's parody that can hold a candle to modern releases as well, and that's what I adore about this record. Give it a listen, you will have a good time with it. Next honorable mention goes to Moonlight Haze with Lunaris. This one came to me via a viewer suggestion, and I'm very thankful I got to cover this Italian symphonic power metal group. While some of the lyrics come off as a bit clunky for the most part, the band remains very firm and focused on what they want to achieve, and it all comes out sounding so crisp and clean, especially opener Till the End, featuring vocalist Chiara Tricarico, flexing her dynamic vocal range in the most tasteful and brilliant way. And the dangerous art of overthinking still remains one of the coolest boss battle themes that never made it into a video game. It's such an epic track all around. This album is gorgeous. It could easily be made into some kind of play with all of its theatric elements. It won't be for everyone. Again, there are some awkward moments here and there. That's why it's not on the list proper, but I encourage everyone to give this album a fair shot. Next honorable mention goes to Futuristic with Featuristic. It was kind of tough to choose between this and his other record earlier this year, Still on the Rise, but in the end, I came back to this one more often, which I was surprised by since I love Still on the Rise so much, but this was just such an enjoyable, bopping record, and I don't even know where to start singing its praises. Let's just start with the opener, Now or Never, a 5-minute cypher-like performance with 4 other rappers, and every single artist works so well over this piano-assisted beat. This is how you open up a rap album. And I also really like Flag on the Play, with its bop of a beat, also aided by piano work, but it's much more ominous and threatening. And Don't Push Me amps up the eeriness to the extreme with the distorted synths. Futuristic is such a chameleon when it comes to his voice. He can really blend in with pretty much anything, and that really shows on this record, whether it be some more emo rap stuff with Ain't a Thing, R&B with Come Home and We Could Be, and straight mosh bangers with Michael Jordan. While 2019 may not have been the strongest year for Futuristic, he really came back in 2020 with some heat, and I'm only hoping that 2021 brings even more great and unique stuff from him. Love this record, give it a shot. Next honorable mention goes to Machine Gun Kelly with Tickets to My Downfall. No doubt this one's going to be controversial, as there's been some very polarizing opinions for this one. Some call it a clear, transparent copy of 2000's punk, others call it a fun novelty and his best to date, and I've got to agree with the latter here. I think it's his most consistent and enjoyable album to date. While it is true that Machine Gun Kelly may not have the unique voice in pop punk at all, it's hard to avoid his wondrous ability to craft a song that can hold one's attention, especially these hooks, which are very prominent, some almost bordering on earworm material such as My Ex's Best Friend, Kiss Kiss, and Concert for Aliens. All are just fun, bratty, punky tracks that sound like they were birthed straight out of early 2000s angst, and I love it. As much as I do love a lot of the production and instrumentation here, Machine Gun Kelly's monotone delivery holds us back from getting any higher than an honorable mention, killing a lot more of the tracks I feel like they should have had a bit more emotion, like Lonely, Jawbreaker, and Forget Me Too with Halsey. In fact, Halsey's performance is phenomenal. Definitely a highlight for this record. She brings all the energy in that track and kinda saves it. With all the crap I've seen being flung at this album, I expected to hate it, but I kept an open mind and I found a lot to enjoy here. Of course, it doesn't help that Travis Barker from Blink-182 is associated with this record and played drums on nearly every track, so hey, I liked it a lot. Second to last honorable mention goes to Halsey with her album Manic. This album came as quite a surprise to me in multiple ways. One, because I knew I was going to like it going off the strength of the singles, and the fact that it's such a massive step up in quality between this and her last album, Hopeless Fountain Kingdom. I think the only thing that really holds us back from getting any higher is there's a few too many interludes, and some of the tracks near the latter end of the record become slightly lackluster and forgettable, but aside from that, this is a killer album with some of Halsey's best music to date. Lead single Without Me wound up being one of my favorite tracks of 2018, and some of the tracks that ended up being post-release singles I dare say are even better. You Should Be Sad with its brittle guitar strums and Halsey gliding over this beat as she sings about getting out of this relationship that was clearly nothing more than an act for this guy, being all about material gains instead of emotional ones. Also, Graveyard features a similar beat, but much more melancholic with its somber guitar, yet also poppier in its chorus structure. It commands your attention, and that's what I love in a pop song. Some of the other tunes on here are solid too. 3AM has much more of a punky attitude to it. Killing Boys has this melody that I'm such a sucker for, as Halsey enacts this vengeful fantasy in her lyrics. It's a satisfying listen, and that holds true for the rest of this record. It's a great listen, absolutely worth checking out. And finally, the last honorable mention goes to Eminem with Music to Be Murdered By. No doubt this one will get me some flack too, but I really enjoyed Eminem's latest album here. And no, I'm not factoring in the deluxe edition, this is just the standard 20 tracks. And I think this album is a good breath of relief for Eminem's career. He'd recently come off two of his most polarizing releases to date, Revival and Kamikaze, and I'm not saying this one isn't polarizing because it damn well is, but I do think it's the closest Eminem's come to revitalizing his sound and style that made him famous probably since Relapse, maybe even as far as the Eminem Show. There's quite a few classic throwback tracks to M's older material. Little Engine, Stepdad, and even the Slaughterhouse reunion on I Will goes so hard, and probably one of my favorites here. But there's also quite a few tracks that shows M trying to adapt to modern tropes, whether it be with features such as Unaccommodating with Young M.A., Godzilla with the late Juice WRLD, or No Regrets with Don Toliver, or just trying to blend in with these modern rap instrumentals, case in point the opener Premonition or Lock It Up with Anderson .Paak. There's a lot of variety here. No doubt there will be something for every hip-hop head to enjoy on this record. It's a very impressive late-year release for M, and I hope his next release continues down this path. Whew, alrighty, I know that was a lot, but we're finally done with the honorable mentions. Now it's time to get to the list proper. Number 20 goes to Logic with No Pressure. Been a heavy fan of Logic for a while now. Everybody was my conversion album, and I've been following him intently ever since. I love most of what he drops, and much like Futuristic, he didn't have the strongest 2019, with that Supermarket soundtrack being kinda mediocre, and Confessions of a Dangerous Mind being pretty okay, but definitely lackluster in comparison. Here with his final album, though, he brings the heat and shows how talented of an MC he can truly be. This is apparently a sequel of sorts to his debut commercial album, Under Pressure, and it shows in plenty of different aspects. For one, production was handled by the same guy who produced Under Pressure for the most part, No ID. And let me tell you, these two work together so damn well that even after 6 years of being one of the leading rappers in hip-hop, Logic still sounds in his prime. Songs like Soul Food 2, Hear 'Em Say, and Dark Place all have immaculate production, and it all blends so effortlessly. And even against all the more emotionally charged tracks here, there are still some great bangers to be had, like Perfect, while short at only 1 minute and 40 seconds, has one of the most banging beats on this entire record, plus the confident, buttery flow from Logic. Also, Celebration, while it may not go as hard, it certainly feels like a party as the title would suggest. I'm glad this is the project Logic decided to end his career on. Thanks for all the music, Bobby. Number 19 goes to All Time Low with Wake Up Sunshine. This is one of my most anticipated releases of the year. The singles to this record seemed like they were leading up to something truly spectacular, and yeah, they nailed it. They nailed it very well. And this turned out to be one of my favorites from them in a long time, and also one of my favorite pop punk releases in years. There are so many tracks off this record that could have been hits, but let's start with the actual hits first. Monsters with Black Bear is great. It has a heavier bass and much more metal energy than is normal for the genre, but both Alex Gaskarth and Black Bear managed to make their way around this minor difference. Also, Sleeping In is probably my favorite track here. It's got a nice poppy vibe to it under these guitar and drums, and that chorus just clicks with me in so many ways. The tempo and how it just jolts in from the light strip of the instrumental and vocals. In fact, I think the first half of this record could have easily been released as singles. Melancholy Kaleidoscope, the title track, along with the other singles as well, Some Kind of Disaster and Getaway Green, all fantastic tracks that stand out in the band's catalog. I mean, the latter half of this album is also great. I especially love January Gloom with its shrill guitar strumming and lyrics about the ugly January weather, trying to get out of this seasonal depression. Glitter and Crimson is another standout with this much more acoustic tinge and Alex's softer, more personal sounding delivery. Chantable choruses scatter across this record, and the instrumentals back it all up with nostalgia of better times in the genre. Fantastic album, give it a listen. Number 18 goes to Cavetown with Sleepyhead. Got this one from a viewer suggestion, and I'm so happy that I ended up covering it. Robbie Skinner, the creative mind behind the Cavetown alias, churns out some beautiful, sentimental bedroom indie pop that just rips at the heart with its minimalism, warm lyrics, and earnest vocal performance on pretty much every single track. Trying especially became a standout to me, a track that I could see connecting to multiple demographics with its lyrics sung in a gentle, thankful way. Snail as well really stuck out to me, a lot more on the instrumental side, opening up with a soul acoustic guitar, but then ramps up with an electric one, a full tempo change, and that damn violin melody is so beautiful. And then devolves back down into existential lyrics about wanting to be a kid again. A lot of other gorgeous tracks here as well I want to mention. The gloomy February 14th, the wholesome Things That Make It Warm, the morbid sadness contained in Closer Empty Bed. But of course, you can find my full review of this project to get everything. This album is wonderful. It's soft, pillowy, yet can still strike with gut-punching emotions. Highly recommended. Number 17 goes to Ashton Irwin with Super Bloom. So this was the album that fucked up my list, as I knew I had to put it on here somewhere because this album just blew me out of the water. I mean, was anyone expecting the drummer from 5 Seconds of Summer to put out a progressive, introspective rock album? And to have it be one of the best things 5 Seconds of Summer has ever put out? That's a real accomplishment, and Ashton did it here with flying colors. Even the slower tracks here tackle some real important topics. Lead single Skinny Skinny addresses this discomfort with one's body image, and Sunshine, while definitely not my favorite, is about isolation, seemingly regarding the pandemic in general, even mentioning being locked in the house. But it's the louder, more in-your-face tracks instrumental-wise that sell this album in multiple ways. Tracks like Have You Found What You're Looking For, The Sweetness, and the epic track that is Greyhound, all are phenomenal, that put Ashton in this light as much more than just a drummer. Thankfully, the band seems to still be together, as Ashton was perfectly okay to create this record on his own time. I'll be holding out for a follow-up if it comes. Maybe this is just a one-time thing, so if it is, Ashton certainly made magic here. Number 16 goes to Heat with Heat 2. Got this other one from a viewer suggestion as well, and let me safely say that the Scandinavian rock and metal scene has got some powerhouses over there, and Heat is one of the strongest, and their album Heat 2 proves that. Bringing this nostalgic hard rock into the modern era with crisp production, absolutely killer performances on guitar solos and drum work. Plus, vocalist Eric Gronwall really harnesses a lot of what I hear at least to be Rob Halford from Judas Priest, really in tracks like Dangerous Ground, Under the Gun, and Come Clean as well to an extent. Even slower track Nothing to Say still hits very hard. There is just so much in this album to sink your teeth into. If you love that signature hard rock, almost bordering on some hair or maybe glam metal, this will be right up your alley. You do not want to sleep on this album if what I said intrigues you. A lot of this record is just banger after banger after banger. All these tracks are hits in one way or another. Give this group a listen. You won't regret it at all. Number 15 goes to Joji with Nectar, an album I touched on rather briefly in my review recall, but I have returned to it several times since, and this album just slaps from front to back. Joji really stepped it up from his last record, giving more engaging, sultry tunes but with a bit more of a pop flavor. Key example is the Diplo collaboration and produced Daylight, which isn't overly poppy. In fact, it's perfect for Joji with the slower tempo, still the bright synth work, but also an ominous presence and deep piano that suits his style. I'm also a sucker for the mostly rap track Pretty Boy with Lil Yachty. The distortion and minimalism reminds me almost of one of his Pink Eye tracks, plus Joji giving a bit more of a silly, happy delivery, and the Lil Yachty feature actually works very well over this beat. I've also got to mention the amazing ballad of Like You Do, the bubbly murky piano and Joji giving a beautiful, heartfelt performance. It really stands out. And I have to give one final track shout out to Run, easily my favorite track on this record. That submerged guitar riff, Joji's quivery vocals, plus a miraculous falsetto change for the chorus that doesn't sound out of place at all. It is a heavy vibe of a tune. While this album may seem like a turnoff at 18 tracks, it breezes by at a respectable pace, doesn't feel bloated, and nearly every track is memorable to an extent. Wonderful album, really excited for where Joji's gonna go next. Number 14 goes to Oliver Tree with Ugly is Beautiful. I seem to be the only one who was really head over heels for this record. I managed to catch a bunch of other reviews when this came out, and a bunch seemed to say that it was a good album, but that's about it. It was just good. And frankly, I think this album's great. Oliver's got a very unique style, but also a universal style. He sounds like no one else, but can blend in with virtually anything. The rap-infused Bury Me Alive, the club party jam of 1993, the horrorcore-inspired Joke's on You, and the slower-tempoed yet heavy closer I'm Gone. There's so much variety in this album. I did see a lot of people say he starts to get a bit boring right near the 10 to 11 track. It starts to become a bit formulaic, and I can definitely see that, but I think there's enough creativity that makes every single track on here stand out in one way or another. What I am a little bit confused by are some of the tracks on here that have been featured on previous EPs of his. Songs like Hurt, Miracle Man, and especially Alien Boy. I don't know why some of these songs are still around and taking up spaces here on the record, but I still do enjoy the songs, so I'm not complaining too much as a whole, but it just seems slightly lazy in my opinion. Overall, a lot of these tracks were pretty damn great, and if this is supposedly Oliver's last album, despite it only being his first, then I will happily take this as a swan song of sorts. Thanks, Oliver. Number 13 goes to Malcolm with his album Vibey Rock. Yeah, I'm very sure few of you actually know who this guy is. As always, you can check the full-length review for all the context you might need, because we're here to just talk about the music, and it's some of the most perky, wavy, relatable, and downright feel-good music I've heard all year. Let's start with the obvious. Malcolm, as a singer, is a quirky character to say the least. He's got a bit of a joyous optimism to his vocals, despite talking about admittedly negative things at times, like Manly Man, where he knows he can't compete with some of these bigger, muscular guys who go to gyms all the time, or Leave Me Alone, where he finds solace in his antisocial nature, or especially Ride Again, which paints this melancholic picture over this sunny guitar and snaps about hoping for a shot at redeeming this relationship until that last verse, where he succumbs to reality and thinks maybe it's best they part ways. For such a young artist to have such vivid tracks that can tug at heartstrings or come off as relatable as they do, it's quite an accomplishment, and maybe it's just me falling in the perfect demographic for this type of music, but I cannot recommend this enough. It's 8 tracks, it's pretty damn stellar. Give it a listen. Great album. Number 12 goes to Adam Lambert with Velvet. What a great comeback for Adam Lambert's solo career, previously vacant for 5 years since his last album, the original High. And this album just comes out of the gate swinging and rarely ever eases up. The opening 3-track run alone is enough of a reason to listen to this album. The title tracks Superpower and Stranger You Are all top-tier Adam Lambert songs with their funky aura, killer bass line, and Adam's vocals not budging an inch. He sounds just as good as ever. The rest of the album is fairly consistent. Roses shows Adam going headfirst into this disco funk courtesy of Chic frontman Nile Rodgers, and Closer to You may be the only ballad here, but it is propelled and elevated by Adam's powerful vocal presence, probably the best showcase of such on this record, and Love Don't almost sounds like a Queen song, which is very fitting since he resides as the current lead vocalist for the Queen and Adam Lambert namesake. There is so much to love with this album. If you enjoy your pop with a funk twist and slight rock garnish, this will be the album for you. absolutely worth a listen. Number 11 goes to Baby No Money with Good Luck, Have Fun. A little bit of a biased one, been a fan of Baby No Money for a while now, even before he blew up, and while I still think his first 2019 album, Recess, is his best, this is a damn close second. Baby No Money has been one of the more silly figures in rap, mainly in a lot of the beat selection he uses being very atypical for the genre. A lot more experimental options, mainly regarding a bubbly bass that also suffices as a backing percussion for less prominent skitters. And also a lot of woodwind melodies, but he can also use some funnier ones like on Me Me Me, which sounds like he's just hitting a saucepan or a tall glass with a spoon. It's stuff like that that makes Baby No Money so enjoyable to me. Plus with him just being a funny persona in rap, like in Astrology, where after his second verse, he says, normally I'd make a bridge right here, but today I just wasn't really feeling it, and then shoots right into the final chorus. There are some true bangers on here that I think could stand up with a bunch of modern rap today, stuff like I'm a, Man in the Mirror, and Keep Up, but as a full experience of an album, this is just a delight to sit through. Recommended, give it a listen. Number 10 goes to Noah Jeans with Apotheosis. Yet again, I know some of you aren't going to know who this guy is, you know where to click, but for a brief summary, Noah's music has always been very ethereal, spacious, and otherworldly, using a bunch of ambient qualities, whether it be an echoed vocal delivery, some stronger than others, or just a minimalist beat, usually with some type of pitched guitar or moody synths. And while this album is just a very brief listen, 10 tracks, 28 minutes, with one being an intro and 2 more being instrumental interludes, the remaining 7 tracks kick so much ass. The Rapture comes again as a mellow acoustic gem. Tell Me What You Want dives into a bit more of a radio-ready sound with a buzzing instrumental, upbeat percussion, and groovy melody all around. And lead single Afterglow introduces these glimmering synths, drums that are pushed to the forefront, capturing the track in these verses about getting out of this negative relationship. But for me, it's a lot of the ballads and slower tracks that sell this record. Cranium is a blissfully melancholic track led by this final call of a whistle for the melody, and that chorus is angelic and beautiful. Also, Late Night Love, much more of a sensual listen, presenting more of an R&B tinge, with the percussion feeling very inspired by the genre itself. Also, the seductive guitar work, and Noah's lyrics about meeting this angel who descended onto the planet, blessing him with feelings and experiences he never dreamed of. And with such a gripping chorus melody, the track clicks for me, and I really hope this album would for you as well. I recommend this every time. Number 9, we got Max with Color Vision. I was highly awaiting a Max return at some point, and it seemed closer and closer with each passing single, and how good they were all turning out. Love Me Less with a thick percussion and Max hollering on the vocals every now and then, it's one of the most gripping songs on the record. Also, Check This with Chromeo. Come on, are you kidding me? The song was a banger from the names alone, and it certainly delivered in spades. Also, some of the other bops on here are definitely worth mentioning. Working for the Weekend with Baby No Money suits said featured rapper incredibly well with its snappy drums and gentler bass. The verses are nice and tame here, but that chorus is irresistible with the trumpets for the drop. Also, Blueberry Eyes with Sugar from BTS, another standout. Trying to be this romantic cut with a pop spin. The driving percussion on the verses, which dissipate into this playful, bouncy chorus with high piano playing, plus a trap skitter because of course it has one. And I also think Sugar blends in really well. The instrumental becomes a bit foggy, letting his unique vocal stand out, and he has a very good flow. Much like Max's debut, this album just has so much fun to sit through. Even if it does start to slow down near the latter end, Where Am I At? A power pop piano ballad about this heart being broken beyond repair in this relationship, blaming it on himself and running away. Also, Closer, There Is a God, unsurprisingly is an ode to his partner and how perfectly they complement him, which makes him believe there is a God. The slowness does not ruin the album as much as that may have come off. It's a nice change-up from the alternative pop gracing this record, and I absolutely think this album was worth the 4-year wait. Great stuff. Number 8, we got Perfect Plan with Time for a Miracle. While I did acknowledge and enjoy most of the Scandinavian rock scene this year thanks to plenty of viewer suggestions, Perfect Plan here, as what I've heard so far, is the cream of the crop when it comes to said genre. This album is really only propelled by one man, and that's not to batter any of the other musicians. They all do a great job, but I'm sorry. If it weren't for Kent Healy's wonderful voice, this band would probably just be another, okay, maybe good band from the genre, but it's Kent's voice that launches the band into legendary material for me. And it really carries tracks like the title song, Just One Wish, and Blame It on Love Again. The opening stretch of this record is fantastic, plus the soaring ballad of Fighting to Win is a beautiful song. It captures so much emotional value in every note sung. I will still stand by that this scene absolutely deserves to be checked out. If they're cranking out talent like this, and with a seemingly endless amount coming down the pipe, I mean, if you love your 80s rock and metal and don't know about this stuff, what are you doing? Number 7, I've got to give it to Niall Horan with Heartbreak Weather. What a shocker of an album. I enjoyed Flicker a lot, but this sophomore release may just be my personal favorite thing any One Direction member has done to date in their solo career. Yes, even more so than Fine Line or anything else any of them have done. I can manage to engross myself in Niall's world with plenty of these tracks because this record comes off as unbelievably heart-pouring. Niall really loved a lot of these songs. It's obvious he put a bunch of effort into them, and he just sounds like he enjoyed making the record even with a title as bleak and depressing as Heartbreak Weather. Some of the tracks here are downright fun. The lead single Nice to Meet You and its rock homage. The title track which really commits itself to this power pop banger from the late 80s. And Small Talk is a sensual burn of a song with ambient verses, but then the drums and bass ramp up to 11 on that chorus. At the same time, there's also emotional gut punches. Second single, Put a Little Love on Me, I can easily see being played at weddings. Closer Still is just a somber IOU to fixing this relationship and a promise to rearrange himself properly. And Black and White is a promising look at the future of this love, seeing him and his partner in black and white getting married. This album just puts a smile on my face with every track. So much to love, so much to enjoy. Phenomenal record. Number 6 goes to Alanis Morissette with Such Pretty Forks in the Road. I frankly thought this album would have been in the top 3, but after taking several re-listens to this and all the albums ahead, I couldn't deny that this had to go here. Doesn't mean I think it's bad, I mean, for Christ's sake, this got 6th. It's an absolute top-tier album and deserves way more love from critics and more fans of Alanis in general who only know her for Jagged Little Pill. Adult contemporary has never been a genre I can fully immerse myself in. Something tells me that I just haven't lived enough years of a life to relate to some of this music, but Alanis just sells me with her distinct, unique voice and beautiful songwriting all across this album. Opener Smiling shows her surrendering after hitting rock bottom, but continues on with a smile on her face, genuine or otherwise. Acoustic tribute to her children ablaze is just a touching moment, with Alanis wanting to keep the lights in her kids' eyes ablaze. And Reasons I Drink, while easily the poppiest track here, led by this pub-esque piano melody as she sings about how much comfort she finds in the usage of alcohol. The rest of the album stands out as well. Sandbox Love and its shrill guitar playing. Closer Pedestal is a spare piano ballad about falling from grace and success. And album highlight Reckoning paints this grim yet eye-opening picture of rape, echoing the Me Too movement in its wake. This album just hit me in a way I frankly wasn't expecting, but I'm thankful it did. And I hope it does the same for you as well. Check it out. Number 5 goes to Kesha with High Road. This one may be another one of my biased picks. I haven't seen all that many people give this album a positive rating, but growing up in the late 2000s, early 2010s, Kesha's music was everywhere, and was some of the few stuff I actually enjoyed coming out of the radio back then. So hearing that this was meant to be a rejuvenation of sorts to her club-ready pop material, it got me a bit excited, and when the full thing dropped, it just struck a childlike whimsical note to me. Kesha's description of what this album was meant to encapsulate is absolutely correct, but I would say updating for the modern time, aka a decade later. There's a lot more rap-infused stuff in this project too. Opener Tonight sounds like it was just handcrafted for a rave, and the Big Freedia-assisted Raising Hell is probably the closest she truly gets to her old sound. A bubbly drop plus an anthemic chorus, yet there's also some more mature, downright cathartic tracks. Look no further than Resentment, where Kesha sings about this mentally exhausting relationship, how she's been bottling up all these emotions after this person let her down, thinking they could be the one. I also really get a sympathetic wave every time I hear Father-Daughter Dance, a track where Kesha never got to truly know her father, and how she won't have that father-daughter dance at her wedding. It's touching the way she pours her heart out. Of course, to balance everything out, there's gotta be some sillier tracks as well, catering to those playful impulses Kesha seems to have. Case in point, the Potato Song, which while it is souring on me a little bit with each listen, I can at least confidently assume that Kesha had fun with this track. And after the turbulent career she suffered through, it feels good to hear Kesha having fun with her music. I also gotta shout out both Birthday Suit and Kinky, two really amusing bouncy tracks in their own respective way, Birthday Suit with its chiptune flavored beats, and Kinky with the shimmering synth and sexy undertone. And while they aren't as fun or even hit ready as anything from her early 2010 material, they are a pleasure to listen to, and that stands as a testament for this album. It's quirky, it's unique, but can also be emotionally powerful, and shows Kesha can really hit the 1-2 combination in pop music, get you dancing, and then also get you evaluating at the same time. That's why I love this album so much. Keep doing you, Kesha. I'll be cheering you on. Number 4 goes to Gorillaz with Song Machine Season 1 Strange Times. I know, I gave this album an 8.5, and both Alanis and Kesha got 9.5. What's the big deal? Well, believe it or not, guys, opinions do change, and I have found myself returning to this Gorillaz album more and more, and enjoying it more with every single return to it. Gorillaz really knocked it out of the park with this one, and subverted all of my expectations with this album. I was expecting something akin to another version of Humans, but the quality and onslaught of these singles that were just coming every month, the hype for this record, at least for me, was bordering on unbearable, so when this dropped, yeah, it certainly wasn't a letdown at all. I do really think the singles are some of the best tracks here. Very good choices when it comes to singles. Momentary Bliss with the grimy and punky attitude. Pac-Man with the retro chiptune beat plus dark bass, Match Made in Heaven. Strange Times and Aries both borrowing heavily from their features, and also expel some of the best of said craft. And the Pink Phantom is one of the most bizarre combinations and pairings in music. I'm amazed at how cohesive and competent the track is. There are also a lot of the album cuts that surprised me a lot. Of course, The Valley of the Pagans, album release single, and my favorite single of 2020. I've already said my piece in the song several times. Also, The Lost Chord with its haunting, otherworldly ambience and gentle, wavy vibes. MLS with JPEG Mafia and Chai, another very bizarre amalgamation of artists. But it works with the perky, playful beats, and both artists excel in this element in my opinion. I also really like Chalk Tablet Towers with St. Vincent. The distorted retro synth plus the melody is infectious. It's got an upbeat feeling to it. This album only makes me more excited for Gorillaz' future work, and apparently Season 2 is supposed to be starting in a couple months. I'll be buying front row seats. What an album. Number 3 goes to Dua Lipa with Future Nostalgia. I mean, come on. I said this in my singles list that Dua Lipa has undergone one of the biggest and most drastic 180s when it comes to my appreciation. Didn't care for her debut or many of the singles she released, but for this album, I can safely say that I am a hardcore fan of her now. The flavors, the spices on this record, the 80s music is coming back in full swing and I am all for it. Pretty much every song on this record could be a radio hit in some way, and we already had 3, Don't Start Now with its sudden change-up, the piano playing on the chorus morphing into this smooth as hell bass and drums. Break My Heart was on my top 15 singles list, and I love the near staccato melody on that chorus, mimicking the bass melody, and those drums are just captivating as all hell. And while Levitating only made it with a DaBaby remix, the original is still top tier on the record, with Dua's flow on the verses is one of the best on this album. And that chorus with the guitar, powerful synths, and slap-happy drums caught me on first listen. The rest of the album, again, is just as solid. I especially like Physical with a slightly deeper bass and driving melody, Hallucinate being one of the strongest overall vibes here, and Good in Bed with the piano lead, much more of a funk garnish, along with Dua's more sarcastic and charismatic vocals. There are 37 minutes of nothing but pure magic on this record, and I think she's found her true calling in music with this genre detour. And I can only hope she stays on this path of gold and keeps cranking out even more bangers over the years. If you haven't given this a listen, please do yourself a favor and do so as soon as possible. One of the strongest recommendations I'll probably ever give. Number 2 goes to Rina Sawayama with Sawayama. This one got very close to topping my list, but of course there was one album who edged it out. But that doesn't mean that Rina Sawayama's debut album isn't worth listening to at all. In fact, I hope it only propels people to give this a shot if they haven't heard it. This is such a unique pop album. In all my years, I haven't heard anything quite like this, but I'm so glad I was privileged by a viewer's suggestion to check Rina's album out. I'd been aware of her for a minute before, but never got the time to properly check her out, and just on first track Dynasty alone, I knew this is going to be a special album. With the glamorous rock touches accented by Rina's delicate vocals, this is how you open up a pop album. Second track X's made my singles list at number 2. Still a very beautiful listen, lavish production, metal touches, but still a nostalgic 2000s pop structure to it. STFU is a full metal track all throughout, like something Poppy's been doing in recent memories. Heavy riffs, yet still a sinister underlying sarcasm to the track. It's quite beautiful. The rest of the album plays like a who's who of various genres. Chiptune on Paradise and moodier trap-infused pop on Akasaka Sad. Pure passionate balladry on Chosen Family, a track that still stings with every listen. This album has something for everyone on it. Bops, pure surprises, ballads, and some socially conscious lyrical content. There is no way you should deny a thing from this album. Rena's got incredible talent, and she's worth keeping an eye on in the coming years. Mark my words. Here we are at the end of the list. Now, my number 1 pick is a bit more of a personal one. This album changed who I really am and how I listen to music. Something about the stars aligning this year, a worldwide crisis in the pandemic, plenty of systemic racial issues circling everyone like a horde of vultures. Also, political troubles as well. It was a rough and negative year for everybody. And while I normally listen to positive, upbeat music to try and distract myself from such atrocities, my number 1 pick defied that, as it's not only an album that is predominantly negative, but also an album that was miraculously released before all this shit even happened, and still stood out to me and actually rewrote my book on how to properly take in and review music. That album is Spanish Love Songs with Brave Faces, everyone. I don't even know where to begin to start talking about this album. Let's start with the most brutal part to me, Dylan Slocum's vocals. Doesn't matter what damn song he's on, he's always sounded right on the verge of a mental breakdown. It's downright tough to listen to some of these tracks, such as Generation Loss, as he hollers on this chorus about not having enough money to live properly, constantly living with anxiety all throughout your life. Also, the brutal single that is Kick, where the world is just always going to strike you down, trying to make do with what you can, but you're still stuck in the same mundane routine. Dolores as well, one of the slower tracks here, dealing with the onslaught of negative news bombarding televisions. And even during a horrible death or accident, people will say they're praying. Isn't that good enough? Yeah, if you couldn't already tell, the lyrics are the main focus of this record. And wow, are they some brittle, honest, ripping lyrics to boot. Songs like Optimism as a radical life choice deal with coping with the hell that is the current world, putting on a smile to at least try to come off clean and positive. But in the end, it all comes crumbling and your lifeboat starts to sink as you try to paddle to the other side. Losers may just be the most bleak and downright depressing moment on this record. Suffering through a pessimistic mindset, everything's going wrong. You can't even see a doctor regularly, bordering on eviction from your apartment, and then culminating with a simple thought. Is it cheaper just to die? And you hold out for hope, but deep down, you get to this minor revelation. It gets harder, doesn't it? And the closing moment of this album, the title track, wondering what's going to become of everything. Climate change is getting worse. There seems to be no end to this formulaic life, living paycheck to paycheck, paying off loans even after all these years. Power shortages are frequent. I mean, at least if we burn this place down, we could have some heat, right? But in the end, put on your brave faces. It's going to be a long journey. This album is not for anyone going through severe mental health issues. These are grim depictions of real life. And I couldn't count how many times I was sobbing, yet also so enthralled with this album. There are very few projects that I have experienced in music that strike me in such a way this album did. And I couldn't be more thankful to this band and this album for being there through the bleakest of moments this year. Brave faces, everyone. We're going to get through this. Hoo boy! That was a long video. If you sat and you're still here, hey, thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoy what you see. I will see you in the next video. Peace.